The memorial wall stretched for kilometers along the main boulevard of New Geneva Station, etched with billions of names in languages both human and alien. Most visitors walked past without reading them, their minds focused on trade deals, diplomatic meetings, or leisure activities. The names had become background decoration, a reminder of wars so ancient that few remembered what they had been fought for. Elena Vasquez ran her weathered fingers across one particular section of the wall, tracing letters that had begun to fade despite the station's best preservation efforts. The nanomaterial was supposed to last forever, but even forever seemed to have limits when faced with the weight of time and indifference. "Commander Vasquez," came a voice behind her. She turned to see a young Centaurian diplomat, his blue-tinted skin gleaming under the artificial lights. "The council is ready for your testimony." Elena nodded but didn't move immediately. At 93, she was one of the last living veterans of the Void Wars, and certainly the last who had served under the legendary Admiral Chen Wei-Ming. The name on the wall before her belonged to a 19-year-old communications officer who had died saving an entire fleet. But nobody remembered that sacrifice anymore. The council chambers buzzed with the typical energy of galactic politics. Representatives from dozens of species filled the circular amphitheater, their translators humming softly as they converted thoughts and words across incompatible vocal systems. Elena took her place at the witness stand, looking out at faces that ranged from familiar human features to the crystalline structures of the Zephyrians. "Commander Vasquez," began the council president, a tall Altarian whose voice resonated like distant thunder. "You've requested this session to discuss the proposed decommissioning of the Memorial Preservation Program. The council finds this unusual given your status as a war veteran." Elena straightened in her chair. The irony wasn't lost on her that she, who had fought alongside those memorialized on the walls, was now fighting to keep their memory alive. "Honored representatives, I stand before you not as a relic of the past but as a witness to the foundations of our current peace." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The Budget Committee had recommended cutting funding for memorial maintenance, arguing that resources would be better spent on education and infrastructure. After all, the wars had ended over 70 years ago. Peace had become so normal that conflict seemed like ancient mythology. "The Void Wars cost us 43 billion lives across 17 systems," Elena continued, her voice carrying despite her age. "Humans, Centaurians, Zephyrians, even early Altarian colonies. We fought not for territory or resources, but for the right of every species to exist without fear of extinction." She gestured toward the wall visible through the chamber's transparent aluminum windows. "Those names represent more than casualties. They represent the moment our species chose to stand together instead of apart. Before the wars, we were scattered, suspicious, competing. After them, we became what you see today, a galactic community." The Centaurian trade representative leaned forward. "With respect, Commander, maintaining these memorials cost the Alliance 3 billion credits annually. Credits that could fund schools, hospitals, research facilities. The dead cannot benefit from our remembrance, but the living can benefit from improved infrastructure." Elena had expected this argument. She'd heard variations of it for decades as funding was gradually reduced. "Representative Klex, tell me, what do you know about the Battle of Proxima Station?" The blue-skinned diplomat consulted his datapad quickly. "A decisive engagement in the final year of the Void Wars. Alliance forces prevented enemy breakthrough to the core systems." "That's the official summary," Elena said. "But the real story is that Admiral Sarah Kim held position for 18 hours with a crippled fleet, knowing she was buying time for civilian evacuations at the cost of her own life, and the lives of 12,000 crew members. She could have retreated. Military doctrine said she should have retreated. But she understood that some things matter more than tactical advantage." The chamber had grown quiet. Elena could see she had their attention, but she also saw the skeptical expressions. To them, these were ancient stories, irrelevant to modern concerns. "The enemy we fought wasn't just another species seeking resources," she continued. "The Devourers had a simple philosophy. Only the strongest deserved to exist. They saw cooperation as weakness, diversity as inefficiency. They believed the galaxy would be better served by a single, perfected species." A young human representative from the outer colonies spoke up. "But Commander, that threat was eliminated generations ago. Why should current citizens bear the cost of maintaining memorials to a war they never experienced? Elena smiled sadly. Because forgetting how we got here makes it easier to lose what we've built. The Devourers weren't wrong about one thing. Maintaining a diverse, cooperative civilization requires constant effort. It's easier to fall back into suspicion, competition, and conflict. She stood slowly, her joints protesting after sitting for so long. I've watched this erosion for decades. First, we stopped teaching detailed history of the wars in schools. Then we reduced memorial ceremonies to brief annual acknowledgments. Now we want to stop maintaining the memorials themselves. Each step makes sense in isolation, but together they represent a dangerous trend. The Zephyrian representative, her crystalline form refracting the chamber lights into rainbow patterns, chimed in with her musical voice. What specific danger do you foresee, Commander? The same danger every civilization faces when it forgets why its values matter, Elena replied. We take peace for granted. We assume cooperation is natural rather than chosen. We start viewing our allies as competitors rather than partners. Small conflicts emerge that might have been resolved through dialogue in the past. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as possible. I'm not asking you to fund these memorials out of sentiment. I'm asking you to fund them as insurance. The cost of maintaining memory is nothing compared to the cost of repeating history. The council president called for a brief recess, and Elena watched as representatives clustered in small groups debating in hushed tones. She had said what she came to say, but she wasn't optimistic about the outcome. The mathematics of politics rarely favored the past over the present. As she waited, Elena's mind drifted back to the wall outside, to the name she had traced before coming here. Chen Wei-Ming had been more than an admiral. She had been a philosopher of war who understood that the greatest victories were those that made future wars unnecessary. Her final message to the fleet had become legendary among military historians. We fight not to destroy our enemies, but to prove that a better way is possible. The recess ended, and Elena prepared for the question she knew would come. But regardless of the council's decision, she had one more card to play. The memorial wall wasn't the only way to preserve memory, and she hadn't survived 93 years by accepting defeat easily. The vote was closer than Elena had feared, but worse than she had hoped. The Memorial Preservation Program would receive funding for 2 more years before being permanently discontinued. 2 years to find an alternative, or watch 70 years of remembrance fade into bureaucratic efficiency. Elena returned to her small apartment on the residential level of New Geneva Station, her mind already working on contingencies. The walls of her living space told the story the council chamber could not. Photographs from the war years, commendations from battles long forgotten, personal letters from comrades whose names now graced the memorial wall. Her communication console chimed with an incoming message. The holographic display showed Dr. Marcus Chen, a xenoarchaeologist from Terra University. His resemblance to the late Admiral Chen Wei-Ming was unmistakable. He was her great-grandson, one of the few family members who had maintained interest in his ancestors' legacy. Elena, Marcus said, his image flickering slightly due to the distance between systems. I heard about the council vote. I'm sorry the preservation program didn't receive full funding. 2 years is better than immediate cancellation, Elena replied, settling into her favorite chair. But it's not enough time to change minds through normal channels. I need something more dramatic. Marcus leaned forward in his transmission, intrigued. What did you have in mind? Elena gestured toward a locked storage unit in the corner of her apartment. Your great-grandmother left behind more than just her official reports. She kept detailed personal logs throughout the war, including information that was classified until recently. Stories that never made it into the history books. Information about what? About why we really won the Void Wars, Elena said. The official histories credit superior tactics, alliance cooperation, and technological innovation. But the real reason was something much more fundamental about human nature, something that other species found impossible to understand. She moved to the storage unit and entered a complex biometric sequence. The container opened to reveal data cores, personal effects, and what appeared to be a small artifact of unknown origin. I've been waiting for the right moment to share this information, Elena continued. Chen believed that humanity's greatest strength would also be our greatest vulnerability in peacetime. She prepared a message for future generations, but only to be revealed when that vulnerability began to manifest. Marcus studied his great-grandmother's belongings through the holographic link. What kind of vulnerability? The tendency to forget why our values matter when they're not being tested, Elena said. Chen predicted that within a century, the galactic community would begin taking cooperation for granted. She left instructions for preserving not just the memory of the war, but the understanding of what made victory possible. Elena picked up one of the data cores, its surface etched with symbols that seemed to shift in the light. This contains her complete analysis of human psychological warfare tactics, including the incident that turned the tide of the entire conflict. The Battle of Kepler Station. Even across interstellar distances, Elena could see Marcus's eyes widen. The Battle of Kepler Station was famous as the first major Alliance victory, but the details had been classified for decades. Recent declassification had revealed only basic tactical information. What really happened at Kepler? Marcus asked. Elena inserted the data core into her console and Admiral Chen's voice filled the room. Even after 7 decades, Elena felt a chill hearing her old commander speak. Personal log. Admiral Chen Wei-Ming, Day 847 of the Void Wars. Today we achieved something I never thought possible. We made the Devourers afraid. The recording continued with technical details about the battle, but Elena fast-forwarded to the crucial section. The enemy had us outnumbered 3-1, with superior firepower and defensive positions. Standard military doctrine suggested retreat or negotiated withdrawal, but Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez proposed something unprecedented, a direct assault using only volunteer crews, with full knowledge that survival was unlikely. Elena paused the recording. This is where the official histories usually focus on brave sacrifice and tactical brilliance. But what they miss is what happened next. She resumed the playback. Chen's voice took on a note of amazement. What the Devourers couldn't understand was why humans would volunteer for almost certain death to protect people they had never met. Their entire philosophy was based on survival of the fittest, individual strength, and personal advancement. They had computed the logical response to their overwhelming advantage and prepared accordingly. Marcus was leaning forward now, completely absorbed. But Rodriguez's volunteers weren't acting logically, the recording continued. They were acting on something the Devourers had no framework for understanding. The human capacity to value abstract principles more than personal survival. Not just occasionally in moments of passion, but systematically as a military strategy. Elena stopped the recording again. The volunteers succeeded, not because their sacrifice turned the battle, but because their willingness to sacrifice broke the enemy's ability to predict human behavior. From that point forward, the Devourers couldn't reliably anticipate Alliance responses. That's incredible, Marcus said. But why was this kept classified? Because Chen realized it could be used against us, Elena replied. She understood that this same human trait that won. The war could make us vulnerable to manipulation by anyone who learned to exploit our tendency to sacrifice for principles. Elena activated another section of the recording. I'm leaving this analysis for future commanders, but only to be revealed when humanity faces its greatest test. Not external enemies, but internal complacency. The day we stop valuing our principles enough to sacrifice for them is the day we become vulnerable to any enemy clever enough to use our own nature against us. The recording ended, leaving the apartment in thoughtful silence. Marcus finally spoke. Elena, this information could change how we understand the entire war, but more importantly, it validates your concerns about memorial preservation. If we forget why those sacrifices mattered, we lose more than just history. Exactly, Elena said. But simply releasing this information won't be enough. People need to experience the relevance, not just read about it. I need to find a way to make the past feel immediate and urgent. She looked out her apartment window at the memorial wall, now illuminated by the station's night cycle. Thousands of people passed by every hour, but fewer than a dozen had stopped to read the names during her observation. Marcus, how quickly could you get to New Geneva Station? I could be there within 2 weeks if I take emergency transport. Why? Elena smiled for the first time since the council vote. Because I'm going to need help implementing your great-grandmother's contingency plan. She didn't just leave behind analysis of the war. She left behind a blueprint for preventing the next one. What kind of blueprint? Instructions for creating what she called memory anchors, Elena said. Experiences that make historical lessons feel personal and immediate. But implementing them will require more than just historical knowledge. I'll need someone who understands how to make the past speak to the present. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. I'll arrange transport immediately. But Elena, what exactly are we trying to accomplish? Beyond preserving the memorials, I mean. Elena looked again at the wall outside, then at the photos of her fallen comrades. We're going to remind the galaxy why some things are worth fighting for, she said, and why some people are worth remembering, even when their names are forgotten. Marcus arrived on New Geneva Station during the morning shift change, when the corridors buzzed with beings from dozens of species heading to work, school, or recreation. Elena met him at the transport dock, noting how much he resembled his great-grandmother in build and bearing, though his eyes held the academic curiosity of a researcher rather than the steady resolve of a military commander. The station has changed since my last visit, Marcus observed as they walked toward Elena's apartment. More commercial districts, fewer military installations. Peace is profitable, Elena replied. Military installations don't generate revenue like shopping centers and entertainment complexes. The memorial wall is one of the few reminders that this place was once a fortress. They passed a group of young Centaurian students on an educational tour, their guide explaining the station's architecture and trade importance. Elena noted that the guide didn't mention the war years or the battles fought to keep this station operational. In her apartment, Elena showed Marcus the complete collection of Admiral Chen's materials. Beyond the data cores and personal effects, there were detailed schematics for something called empathy induction networks and psychological profiles of every major species in the current alliance. Your great-grandmother was more than a military strategist, Elena explained. She was an anthropologist who understood that lasting peace required more than just victory. It required understanding. Marcus examined the schematics with growing amazement. These are incredibly sophisticated. She designed a system for creating shared experiences across species barriers, but the technology described here is beyond what existed during the war. Chen was planning for the future, Elena said. She knew that keeping peace would be harder than winning war. These designs were her insurance policy, intended for the moment when the alliance began to fragment. Elena activated a holographic display showing Chen's analysis of post-war social dynamics. Predictive models filled the air, tracking alliance cohesion, species cooperation, and memorial attention across 7 decades. Look at this. Elena pointed to a declining curve. Chen predicted that memorial interest would drop to critical levels approximately 75 years after the war's end. We're at year 72. Marcus studied the projections. These models are remarkably accurate. But Elena, implementing these empathy induction networks would require resources we don't have. The technology alone would cost more than the entire memorial preservation program. Not if we do it Chen's way, Elena said, pulling up another set of files. She didn't design the system to require massive resources. She designed it to use the memorial wall itself as the primary component. The schematics revealed that the memorial wall had been constructed with hidden capacity for quantum resonance emitters. The names etched in nanomaterial weren't just commemorative. They were designed to serve as individual transmission nodes for experiential data. Incredible, Marcus breathed. The wall is already equipped for this. But how do we activate systems that have been dormant for 70 years? Elena smiled grimly. Chen left activation codes with 3 people she trusted. Herself, the station's chief engineer, and me. Since I'm the only one still alive, that makes me the key. She led Marcus to a secured section of the station that required multiple authorization levels to access. The memorial wall's maintenance area stretched beneath the public display, filled with quantum processors and memory storage units that had never been activated. The system requires experiential templates, Elena explained, accessing Chen's technical specifications. Memories that can be transmitted across species barriers to create emotional understanding. Chen recorded hundreds of these templates during the war, but they need to be updated for current context. Marcus ran his hands over the dormant equipment. You're talking about sharing actual memories, making people experience what the war veterans felt? Not just what they felt, Elena corrected. What they chose. The critical moments when individuals decided that something was more important than their own survival. Chen believed that understanding those moments was the only way to prevent future conflicts. They spent the next several hours reviewing the technical requirements, The system was elegant in its simplicity. Visitors to the memorial wall would experience brief but intense shared memories triggered by proximity to specific names. The experiences would be tailored to each species' psychological framework, ensuring maximum impact without overwhelming foreign neurology. "There's one problem," Marcus said after finishing his analysis. "These memory templates need to be current. Historical experiences might not translate effectively to modern consciousness. We need someone who understands both the original experiences and contemporary psychology." Elena had anticipated this issue. "That's where your expertise becomes crucial. You understand how to make ancient experiences relevant to modern minds, but we'll also need test subjects from different species to calibrate the emotional resonance." "I might know some people who would be willing to help," Marcus said thoughtfully. "Graduate students mostly, but representing several different species. They'd understand the historical significance." Elena activated the wall's diagnostic systems, and status displays throughout the maintenance area came to life for the first time in decades. Most systems showed green, indicating that Chen's engineering had been remarkably prescient. "Elena," Marcus said suddenly, "there's something I need to tell you. My research into the Void Wars hasn't been purely academic. I've been investigating reports of Devourer technology appearing in the outer systems. Small amounts, but enough to suggest that someone has been salvaging their equipment." Elena turned from the diagnostic display, her expression serious. "How much technology? And how recently?" "Nothing conclusive," Marcus admitted. "But several independent traders have reported finding Devourer ship fragments in unexplored regions. Most authorities dismiss it as scavenging from old battlefields. But the material appears to be in too good condition for that explanation." Elena felt a familiar chill, the same sensation she'd experienced before major battles during the war. Chen's predictive models showed alliance fragmentation beginning around this time. If someone is actively collecting Devourer technology, they might be planning to use their philosophy as a template for future conflicts, Marcus finished. The idea that only the strongest deserve to survive has appeal for certain political movements. Elena moved to another section of Chen's files, accessing intelligence reports that had been classified at the highest levels. "Your great-grandmother suspected that the Devourers weren't unique. Their philosophy was too simple, too appealing to disappear completely just because we defeated their military forces." The files revealed Chen's analysis of post-war political trends, predicting that Devourer ideology would resurface within alliance species rather than from external enemies. "Marcus, we need to accelerate our timeline," Elena said. "If there's even a possibility that Devourer philosophy is making a comeback, we can't wait for official approval or funding. We need to activate these memory networks now." "What about testing? Calibration? We could cause serious psychological damage if we get the resonance frequencies wrong." Elena looked at the memorial wall above them, thinking of the names carved in its surface. Each name represented someone who had taken enormous risks for principles they believed in. "Chen included emergency protocols for rapid deployment," she said. "The system can run preliminary calibrations using my own memories as templates. It's not ideal, but it will allow us to begin limited testing." Marcus hesitated. "Elena, using your memories means experiencing your trauma, your losses, your fear. Anyone who interfaces with the system will feel what you felt during the worst moments of the war." "Good," Elena replied firmly. "That's exactly what they need to feel. Not the glory or the heroism that gets celebrated in popular media, but the real cost of conflict and the real value of peace." She began initializing the emergency protocols, her fingers moving across controls that had waited 7 decades for activation. "Besides," she added, Chen's final message included one more crucial piece of information. The Devourers weren't just trying to conquer territory. They were trying to prove that their philosophy was superior to ours. Every time someone chooses personal advancement over collective good, every time we forget why cooperation matters, we prove their point posthumously. The memorial wall's quantum processors hummed to life, ready to transform carved names into shared experiences. "We're not just preserving memory, Marcus," Elena said. "We're proving that some ideas are worth fighting for, generation after generation." The first test nearly killed Marcus. Elena watched through the medical sensors as his vital signs spiked during the memory interface, his body responding to experiences that belonged to another person in another time. The shared memory was from the Battle of Titan's Gate. where Elena had watched her squad leader sacrifice himself to seal a hull breach that would have killed 200 civilian refugees. When the interface disconnected, Marcus collapsed to his knees, trembling and covered in sweat. "I felt him die," Marcus whispered, his voice shaking. "I felt Rodriguez make the choice to stay behind. I understood why he did it, but I also felt what it cost him." Elena helped him to a chair, her own hands steady despite the emotional weight of reliving that memory through another person's experience. That's exactly what Chen intended. Not just intellectual understanding, but emotional comprehension. They spent the next week refining the calibration, working with the 3 graduate students Marcus had contacted. Each test revealed new aspects of how different species processed human emotional experiences. The Centaurians found human attachment to abstract principles nearly incomprehensible until they experienced the memories directly. The Zephyrians, with their crystalline neural structures, needed modified frequencies to process the intense emotional content. Dr. Kira Thane, a young human xenopsychologist, had proven particularly helpful in translating the experiences across species barriers. The fascinating aspect, she explained during one calibration session, is how universal the core emotions become once you get past the surface differences. Fear, love, determination, sacrifice, like these translate remarkably. Well, once you find the right resonance, frequency. The breakthrough came when they successfully transmitted Elena's memory of Admiral Chen's final battle, speech to all 3 species simultaneously. Each participant experienced the moment when Chen had explained that they were fighting not to destroy their enemies, but to prove that cooperation was possible. "I've never understood human pack bonding instincts before," admitted Vex, the Centaurian graduate student. But experiencing that moment, feeling why the Admiral was willing to die for people she'd never meet, it makes your species' behavior patterns suddenly logical. Elena knew they were ready for the next phase, but she also knew it would be the most dangerous. Full activation of the memorial wall would require her to interface directly with the quantum processors, uploading not just individual memories but her entire experiential framework from the war years. "Elena," Marcus said during their final preparation meeting, "once you upload your complete memory set, there's no guarantee you'll survive the process. Chen's notes indicate that full interface can cause permanent neural damage or death." "Chen survived it," Elena replied, checking the upload parameters one final time. "Chen was 40 years younger when she created the original templates," Marcus pointed out, "and she had military-grade neural enhancement to protect her during the process." Elena looked at her reflection in the interface helmet's polished surface. At 93, she was well past the age when most people could safely undergo extreme neural procedures. But she was also running out of time in more ways than one. "Marcus, yesterday I received word that the outer colonies have detected 3 more caches of Devourer technology. Military analysts are finally taking the reports seriously. If someone is actively rebuilding their capabilities, all the more reason to wait for proper medical support," Marcus interrupted. "Elena, I can't lose you. You're the last living link to these events." Elena smiled at the young man who had become both student and protector. "That's exactly why I can't wait. If I die during this process, at least my memories will be preserved in the system. If I wait and die of natural causes, they die with me." The interface chamber fell silent except for the humming of quantum processors. Elena placed the neural crown on her head, feeling the familiar tingle of synaptic connectors finding their targets. "Final systems check," announced Dr. Thane from the control booth. "All frequencies calibrated, backup processors online, medical monitoring active." Elena closed her eyes and began the upload sequence. Immediately, she felt the system drawing memories from her consciousness, starting with the most emotionally significant experiences. The Battle of Kepler Station, where she had first understood what Admiral Chen meant by fighting for principles rather than territory. The evacuation of New Prometheus, where she had watched civilian ships escape while the military held a doomed position. The final victory celebration, where she had realized that winning the war was easier than building the peace that followed. But the system didn't just extract individual memories. It captured the connecting threads, the reasoning, the emotions, the gradual evolution of understanding that had shaped her worldview. Elena felt pieces of herself being translated into quantum data, becoming part of the memorial wall's permanent record. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time became fluid when consciousness was being parsed and categorized by alien technology. Elena found herself experiencing her own memories from an outside perspective, seeing patterns and connections that had been invisible during the original events. She saw why Chen had chosen her for this responsibility. Not because she was the bravest or most skilled, but because she had maintained the ability to question her own motivations, while never losing sight of core principles. The system needed that balance, the willingness to sacrifice combined with the wisdom to understand what made sacrifice worthwhile. The upload process reached its conclusion, and Elena felt consciousness returning to her own skull. But something had changed. The memories were still hers, but they now existed independently in the memorial wall's quantum matrix. Anyone who touched the right sections of the wall would experience fragments of what she had lived through. Elena. Marcus's voice came from somewhere very far away. Elena, can you hear me? She opened her eyes to find herself surrounded by worried faces. Dr. Thane was monitoring her vital signs while Marcus held her hand. How long? Elena asked, her voice barely audible. 18 hours, Marcus replied. We thought we'd lost you twice. But the upload was successful. The memorial wall is now fully operational. Elena struggled to sit up, feeling the weakness in her limbs that came from extended neural interface. Test it, she said. Find someone who doesn't know the war history and let them experience Rodriguez's choice at Kepler Station. Dr. Thane exchanged glances with Marcus. Elena, we already tested it. Station security brought a young maintenance worker who had never heard of the Void Wars. After touching Rodriguez's name on the memorial wall, he spent 2 hours researching the conflict. He said he needed to understand why someone would make that choice. Elena smiled despite her exhaustion. Then it works. The memories survive even when the people don't. Marcus helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as they walked to the viewing window overlooking the memorial wall. It looked the same as always, kilometers of carved names under gentle illumination. But now Elena knew that each name contained the potential for shared understanding. There's one more thing, Dr. Thane said hesitantly. During the upload, the system detected compatible memory patterns from other sources. It appears that Admiral Chen built the memorial wall to accept memory uploads from any war veteran who chose to contribute. Elena turned to stare at the young scientist. Other sources? What other sources? Names on the wall that correspond to people who uploaded their memories before dying, Marcus explained. Elena, you're not the only one who understood what Chen was planning. Over the past 70 years, at least 24 veterans have used the system to preserve their experiences. Elena looked back at the memorial wall with new understanding. It wasn't just a list of the dead. It was a repository of living memory, maintained by those who understood that some experiences were too important to let fade away. Show me, she said. Show me who else chose to be remembered. The list of veteran contributors read like a roster of forgotten heroes. Elena recognized most of the names, though some had died decades ago while others had uploaded their memories more recently. Each had chosen to preserve not just their personal experiences, but their understanding of why those experiences mattered. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim uploaded her memories just 3 months before her death from age-related illness, Dr. Thane explained, scrolling through the system logs. Her contribution focused on the moment she decided to hold position at Proxima Station despite overwhelming odds. Elena remembered Kim well, a brilliant tactical officer who had saved countless lives through what appeared to be a suicidal defensive action. Sarah always said the hardest part wasn't deciding to sacrifice yourself, but deciding that other people's lives were worth that sacrifice. Marcus pointed to another entry. Colonel James Park uploaded his memories of the surrender negotiations. He wanted people to understand why the Alliance chose to offer the Devourers exile rather than extermination. Park prevented a genocide, Elena said softly. The Alliance had the capability to wipe out the remaining Devourer populations, but Park convinced the leadership that proving our moral superiority was more important than ensuring they could never threaten anyone again. They spent hours reviewing the uploaded memories, each one representing a crucial moment when individuals had chosen principles over personal interest. The memorial wall had become more than a monument. It was a library of moral decision-making, preserved across generations. But Elena's attention was drawn to the most recent upload, dated just 2 weeks ago. Who is Dr. Catherine Miles? She asked, not recognizing the name. Dr. Thane consulted her files. She wasn't a war veteran. She was a xenobiologist who spent her career studying devourer remains. According to her upload logs, she discovered something important about their technology and wanted to preserve the knowledge. Elena felt the familiar chill of approaching danger. Bring up her memories. I need to see what she found. The interface with Dr. Miles's memories was unlike anything Elena had experienced before. Instead of battlefield emotions and split-second decisions, she found herself experiencing the methodical investigation of a scientist uncovering a terrible truth. Through Miles's eyes, Elena saw laboratory analysis of devourer technology that had been discovered in the outer systems. The technology wasn't salvaged from old battlefields. It was newly manufactured, using techniques that had been improved since the original war. Someone has been reverse engineering devourer technology for decades, Elena said, disconnecting from the interface with growing alarm. But that's not the worst part. Miles discovered that the new technology includes biological components that didn't exist in the original devourer ships. Marcus pulled up Miles' technical data. Biological components? What kind of biological components? Elena studied the scientific analysis with increasing horror. Neural network interfaces designed to work with non-devourer species. Someone has been adapting their technology to control other forms of life. The implications hit them all simultaneously. The devourers had never been able to understand or predict Alliance behavior because their philosophy couldn't account for voluntary sacrifice. But if someone could use their technology to modify the behavior of Alliance species, they could turn our greatest strength into a weakness, Dr. Thane said. If they can artificially induce the willingness to sacrifice, they can manipulate entire populations into self-destructive behavior. Elena moved to the Memorial Wall's communication system and began accessing intelligence networks she hadn't used in decades. Her military clearance had never been revoked, and the current crisis gave her authorization to access classified information. What she found confirmed her worst fears. 3. Outer colonies have reported significant behavioral changes in their populations over the past 6 months, she announced. Increased aggression toward Alliance authority, decreased cooperation between species, and what intelligence describes as selective empathy dysfunction. Marcus studied the reports over her shoulder. Selective empathy dysfunction? The ability to feel compassion for their own species while viewing others as threats or competitors, Elena explained. It's the core of devourer psychology. Someone has found a way to artificially induce it. Dr. Thane was already working at another console, analyzing the pattern of affected colonies. Elena, look at this distribution map. The affected colonies form a clear progression toward the core systems. Someone is testing the technology while moving closer to major population centers. Elena felt the weight of command responsibility settling on her shoulders again after decades of civilian life. We need to contact Alliance intelligence immediately. But we also need to accelerate the Memorial Wall activation. If this technology reaches the core systems, people will need to understand why cooperation matters before they lose the ability to choose it. She turned to Marcus and Dr. Thane. I'm authorizing full activation of the Memorial Wall's empathy networks. Every name, every memory broadcast at maximum intensity. People walking past will experience the full emotional weight of what previous generations fought to preserve. Elena, that level of activation could cause psychological trauma in unprepared individuals. Dr. Thane warned. We haven't tested the effects of multiple memory exposures on the same person. The alternative is watching our civilization tear itself apart from the inside, Elena replied. Chen's contingency plans included protocols for emergency activation, precisely because she anticipated a situation like this. Elena began implementing the emergency protocols, her fingers moving across controls that would activate systems throughout the Memorial Wall. As each section came online, she felt the quantum processors drawing power from the station's core reactors. Marcus, I need you to contact every academic institution in the Alliance, she said while working. They need to understand what we're dealing with. Dr. Miles's research shows that this technology specifically targets the neural pathways associated with cross-species empathy. What about Alliance intelligence? Marcus asked. Elena paused in her activation sequence. Intelligence will want to study the technology, possibly try to develop countermeasures. But Chen's analysis showed that the best defense against devourer philosophy isn't technology, it's understanding why their philosophy is wrong. The memorial wall's main power systems came online, with a deep harmonic resonance that could be felt throughout the station. Elena watched as quantum processors throughout the wall synchronized, creating a network capable of transmitting shared experiences to anyone in proximity. Final system check, Dr. Thane announced. All memory banks online, empathy networks synchronized, psychological safety protocols active. Elena looked out at the memorial wall, now humming with energy that had waited 70 years for activation. Soon anyone who approached the wall would experience fragments of the memories that had been preserved there. Moments of choice, sacrifice, and understanding that had shaped the current galactic civilization. Chen's final message included one more piece of information, Elena said, accessing the last encrypted file in the Admiral's collection. She predicted that humanity's greatest test wouldn't come from external enemies, but from forgetting why our values mattered in the first place. The message played in Chen's familiar voice. If you're hearing this, it means the Alliance is facing the crisis I've spent decades preparing for. Remember that the Devourers weren't defeated by superior firepower or tactical brilliance. They were defeated by our refusal to become like them. That choice will need to be made again, by every generation until the end of time. Elena finished the activation sequence and stepped back from the controls. The memorial wall was now fully operational, ready to share the preserved memories of everyone who had chosen to contribute their experiences to future generations. Now we find out if memory is stronger than manipulation, she said, watching as the first curious visitors approached the newly energized memorial wall. The first person to experience the fully activated memorial wall was a young Altarian merchant named Kethril, who had been hurrying past on his way to a business meeting. When his shoulder brushed against the section containing Admiral Chen's name, he stopped mid-step as if struck by lightning. Elena watched from the observation deck as Kethril stood motionless for nearly 5 minutes, his tall frame trembling slightly as he experienced Chen's memory of choosing to sacrifice her fleet to save civilian evacuation ships. When the experience ended, the Altarian sank to his knees, his usual businesslike demeanor replaced by something Elena recognized as profound understanding. It's working, Dr. Thane observed, monitoring Kethril's vital signs through the wall's sensors. His brain chemistry shows the same patterns we recorded during our controlled tests, but amplified. He's not just understanding the memory intellectually, he's feeling the weight of that choice. More people began to notice Kethril's reaction and approach the wall with curiosity. A Centaurian family touched the section containing Lieutenant Rodriguez's name and experienced his decision to seal the hull breach. 2 human teenagers encountered Commander Park's memory of the surrender negotiations and felt his struggle to choose mercy over vengeance. Within hours, word spread throughout New Geneva Station that something extraordinary was happening at the memorial wall. People began arriving specifically to experience the preserved memories, and many left with tears in their eyes and profound questions about their own values. But Elena's satisfaction was short-lived. Her communication console chimed with an urgent message from Alliance Intelligence. "Commander Vasquez," came the voice of Director Harrison Chen, no relation to the Admiral despite the shared surname. "We need you to report to Intelligence Headquarters immediately. The situation in the outer colonies has escalated." Elena, Marcus, and Dr. Thane made their way to the secure levels of New Geneva Station, where Alliance Intelligence maintained one of their regional headquarters. Director Chen met them in a briefing room that displayed holographic star charts showing the affected systems. "The behavioral modifications have spread to 7 colonies," Director Chen began without preamble. "But more concerning is that we've detected organized resistance to Alliance authority in these systems. They're not just becoming more aggressive, they're coordinating their actions." Elena studied the tactical displays with growing alarm. Someone is using the neural modification technology to create a resistance network. They're turning Alliance colonies against the central government. Worse than that, Director Chen continued. "We've intercepted communications that suggest this isn't random technological experimentation. Someone has been planning this operation for decades, using Devourer philosophy as a blueprint for destabilizing the Alliance from within." Marcus leaned forward. "Do you know who's responsible?" Director Chen activated another display showing personnel files. "We're tracking several possibilities, but the most likely candidate is Dr. Wilhelm Kane, a former Alliance researcher who was dismissed from the Devourer Technology Analysis Program 15 years ago for what his supervisors called concerning philosophical alignment with subject matter. Elena recognized the name from classified reports she had reviewed decades earlier. Kane was one of the scientists who argued that the Alliance should adopt Devourer organizational principles after the war. He believed that cooperation was inefficient and that a more hierarchical society would be stronger. Kane disappeared into the outer systems shortly after his dismissal, Director Chen explained. Intelligence suspected he was conducting unauthorized research, but we had no evidence of active threat. We were wrong. Dr. Thane studied Kane's psychological profile. This explains the pattern of neural modifications. He's not trying to turn Alliance species into devourers. He's trying to prove that devourer philosophy is superior by demonstrating the weakness of cooperation-based societies. Elena felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Kane knows that direct military conquest of the Alliance is impossible, but if he can use our own technology to make us abandon cooperation in favor of competition, he proves that devourers were right all along. The memorial wall activation couldn't have come at a better time, Director Chen said. We need something to counter the neural modifications Kane is using. But Commander, we need more than just emotional experiences. We need actionable intelligence. Elena understood what he was asking. You want me to lead a mission to the affected colonies. You're the only person alive with both the military experience to understand what we're facing and the technical knowledge of the memorial wall's capabilities. If Kane is using devourer technology to modify behavior, you might be the only one who can recognize and counter it. Elena looked at Marcus and Dr. Thane, seeing in their faces the same mixture of determination and fear she had felt before major battles during the war. Director, the memorial wall is more than just emotional reinforcement, she said. The preserved memories include tactical and strategic knowledge from every major engagement of the Void Wars. If Kane is using devourer technology, those memories might contain information about weaknesses or countermeasures. She turned to Marcus. I need you to extract every memory related to devourer psychology and behavior modification. If anyone in the past 70 years discovered how their technology works, it will be preserved in the wall. Elena, Marcus said quietly, if you're going to the affected colonies, you'll be exposed to Kane's neural modification technology. There's no guarantee the memorial wall's conditioning will protect you. Elena smiled grimly. That's exactly why I need to go. If the memorial wall's memory conditioning can't protect someone with my level of exposure to the original experiences, then we'll know the technology needs improvement before Kane reaches the core systems. Director Chen activated tactical displays, showing the suspected location of Kane's primary research facility. We believe he's operating from the mining station at Kepler 7, ironically close to the site of the first major Alliance victory. Our plan is to insert a small team to gather intelligence and, if possible, capture Kane alive. Elena studied the tactical situation with the eye of someone who had planned similar operations during the war. Kepler 7 is a fortress. If Kane has modified the population there, we'll be facing people who genuinely believe the Alliance is their enemy. They won't be acting under coercion, they'll be acting on conviction. Which is why we need someone who understands how to fight an enemy that uses our own values against us, Director Chen replied. Elena looked back at the memorial wall through the briefing room's transparent walls. Even from this distance, she could see people experiencing the preserved memories, their faces showing the same mixture of pain and understanding that had characterized the original choices. Admiral Chen left one more gift, Elena said, accessing the final files in the memorial wall's database. Tactical protocols for fighting enemies who have adopted devourer philosophy while retaining Alliance technology. She called it asymmetric empathy warfare. The tactical files were unlike anything in standard Alliance military doctrine. Instead of focusing on firepower or strategic advantage, Chen's protocols emphasized demonstrating the practical superiority of cooperation over competition in real-time combat situations. Director, I'll lead your mission to Kepler 7, Elena said, but I want Dr. Thane and Marcus as part of the team. If we're going to counter Kane's neural modifications, we'll need both the technical expertise and the preserved memories from the wall. Commander, with respect, you're 93 years old, Director Chen pointed out. This mission will require physical capabilities that I may not possess, Elena finished. But Director, this mission will require something more important than physical capability. It will require the absolute certainty that cooperation is worth fighting for, even when fighting is costly and dangerous. She looked around the briefing room at faces that had never experienced real war, never been forced to choose between personal survival and abstract principles. Kane is betting that modern Alliance citizens don't have that certainty, Elena continued. He's betting that when presented with evidence that selfishness is more practical than sacrifice, people will choose the easier path. Elena stood slowly, feeling the weight of her years but also the weight of responsibility that had defined her entire adult life. I'm not going to Kepler-7 to prove that I'm still physically capable, she said. I'm going to prove that some ideas are worth preserving regardless of the cost. The journey to Kepler-7 took 3 days aboard a fast courier ship, during which Elena, Marcus, and Dr. Thane prepared for what they knew might be a one-way mission. Elena spent most of the time reviewing Admiral Chen's asymmetric empathy protocols while interfacing with portable memory cores that contained the most relevant experiences from the memorial. While the key insight, Elena explained during their final strategy session, is that Kane's neural modifications can only work if people lose sight of why cooperation matters. But they can't erase the capacity for empathy. They can only suppress it. Dr. Thane monitored Elena's vital signs as she interfaced with another memory core. Elena, you're pushing your neural system beyond safe limits. These repeated interfaces could cause permanent damage. The alternative is letting Kane prove that the Devourers were right, Elena replied, disconnecting from the interface with visible effort. I'd rather die remembering why they were wrong than live in a galaxy that forgot. As their ship approached Kepler-7, they could see the physical changes Kane had made to the mining station. What had been a simple extraction facility was now a fortress bristling with weapons and defensive systems. But more concerning were the readings from the station's population centers. Neural activity scans show highly elevated aggression markers throughout the civilian population, Marcus reported. But Elena, there's something else. The patterns aren't chaotic, they're organized. Kane isn't just making people aggressive. He's making them into a coordinated military force. Elena studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. Kane learned from the original Devourer failures. They lost because they couldn't understand cooperation, so they couldn't predict Alliance behavior. But Kane understands cooperation perfectly. He's using that knowledge to systematically dismantle it. Their ship received a communication from Kepler-7 as they entered sensor range. The face that appeared on screen was recognizably human but subtly altered. The eyes held a calculating coldness that Elena had seen before in captured Devourer commanders. Alliance vessel, you are entering sovereign territory of the New Order Collective, the modified human announced. State your business or be destroyed. Elena stepped forward to respond. This is Commander Elena Vasquez, requesting permission to speak with Dr. Wilhelm Kane. I have information about the Void Wars that he'll find valuable. There was a long pause before the human responded. Dr. Kane will see you, Commander, but be aware that your Alliance conditioning will be corrected during your stay here. The New Order does not tolerate the weakness of misplaced empathy. Their ship was escorted to a docking bay that had been heavily modified with scanning equipment and defensive systems. As they disembarked, Elena could see the effects of Kane's modifications on the station's population. People moved with purpose and efficiency, but their interactions lacked the casual warmth that characterized Alliance society. Everyone seemed to be evaluating everyone else as either useful or threatening. Kane met them personally, a tall man in his 70s whose appearance had been artificially enhanced to project authority and strength. His eyes held the same calculating coldness Elena had seen in the communication, but there was also genuine intellectual curiosity. Commander Vasquez, Kane said, his voice carrying artificial modulation that emphasized dominance, the last survivor of Admiral Chen's inner circle. I've been hoping to meet you for decades. Elena studied Kane carefully, noting the subtle modifications to his physiology that suggested extensive neural enhancement. Dr. Kane, I've come to understand what you've accomplished here and to ask a question that's bothered me since the war ended. Which question is that? Whether the Devourers were wrong about cooperation being weakness, or whether we were wrong about it being strength. Kane smiled, an expression that held no warmth. An honest question deserves an honest answer. Come, let me show you what 70 years of Alliance cooperation has accomplished. He led them through the station's modified corridors, past work areas where humans and aliens labored side by side with mechanical precision. But Elena noticed that the different species were segregated into separate work groups, with minimal interaction between them. The Alliance promises equality and mutual benefit, Kane explained as they walked. But in practice, cooperation means endless compromise, inefficient decision-making, and the constant need to accommodate the weakest participants. My modifications simply allow people to see these truths clearly, Dr. Thane whispered to Elena. The neural modification signatures are everywhere. He's not just suppressing empathy. He's enhancing analytical thinking while reducing emotional processing. They arrived at Kane's primary laboratory, where Elena saw technology that made her blood run cold. Modified devourer neural interfaces were connected to what appeared to be a massive amplification system. This is my greatest achievement, Kane said proudly. The ability to broadcast neural modifications across entire star systems. Soon every Alliance world will have the opportunity to see reality without the distortion of misplaced emotional attachment. Elena moved closer to examine the equipment, recognizing components from Admiral Chen's technical analyses. You've improved on the original Devourer technology, but you've made one crucial error. Kane turned, his artificially enhanced features showing sudden interest. What error? Elena smiled, feeling the weight of every memory she carried from the memorial wall. You assume that the choice between cooperation and competition is purely rational, but Admiral Chen understood something the Devourers never did. That the strongest human trait isn't our ability to analyze, but our ability to choose principles over self-interest even when analysis suggests it's impractical. Sentiment, Kane dismissed. Emotional conditioning that evolution will eventually eliminate. Marcus, Elena said quietly, activate the portable memory cores. Marcus activated the devices they had brought from the memorial wall, and suddenly the laboratory filled with quantum resonance from the preserved memories. Elena felt the familiar sensation of shared experience as the room's occupants were exposed to fragments of the war veteran's choices. Kane staggered as he experienced Lieutenant Rodriguez's decision to sacrifice himself for people he had never met. His modified neural systems tried to suppress the emotional content, but the memorial wall's conditioning was specifically designed to overcome such suppression. You feel it, Elena said, watching Kane struggle with the conflicting input. You feel why Rodriguez made that choice, and you understand that it wasn't weakness or conditioning. It was strength, the strength to value something more than your own. Survival. Other modified humans in the laboratory were experiencing similar reactions. As the memory cores broadcast fragments of preserved experiences, Elena watched as their carefully controlled expressions began to show confusion, doubt, and the return of suppressed emotional responses. This is temporary, Kane said, though his voice no longer carried the same artificial authority. Neural modification is permanent. These emotional responses will fade. Elena moved to Kane's amplification system and began connecting the memorial wall's memory cores to his broadcast network. You're right that the emotional responses will fade, but the understanding won't. Once people remember why cooperation matters, they can choose it consciously rather than having it imposed through modification. Elena, Dr. Thane warned, if you broadcast those memories through his amplification system, the neural feedback could kill you. Elena continued working, her fingers moving across controls that were similar to those she had mastered on the memorial wall. Admiral Chen understood that some choices have to be made by every generation. Kane has given this generation the opportunity to choose clearly. Kane tried to stop her, but Marcus and Dr. Thane intervened, and Elena noticed that Kane's movements lacked the fluid coordination he had displayed earlier. The memorial wall's conditioning was interfering with his neural modifications. The beautiful irony, Elena said as she completed the connections, is that you've created the perfect delivery system for demonstrating why cooperation is stronger than competition. Every person you've modified will experience the memories of people who chose sacrifice over self-interest. She activated the broadcast system and felt the massive power of Kane's amplification network, carrying the memorial wall's preserved memories across multiple star systems. The neural feedback was immediate and overwhelming. Elena felt her consciousness stretching across space, sharing the experiences of hundreds of war veterans with millions of modified minds. Through the quantum link, She experienced the moment when each affected person encountered the preserved memories. She felt their confusion as they realized that the people they had been taught to see as weak had actually been stronger than anyone Kane had ever created. She felt their understanding as they recognized that true strength came not from eliminating empathy, but from choosing to act on it despite personal cost. The feedback intensified beyond Elena's ability to process, and she felt her consciousness beginning to fragment. But she also felt something else. The moment when millions of people across multiple systems chose cooperation over competition, not because they had been conditioned to do so, but because they